Hello, friends. Hello, my friends. Welcome once again to Improv and Magic. I'm your host and your friend, LD Madeira, and I hope you're having a great day today. My guest is the leading female illusionist of today, with a huge international presence and a true trailblazer in magic. Today's guest is Josephine Lee. Josephine's fresh modern spin has revolutionized the world of magic ever since her appearance on Britain's Got Talent. It was such a wonderful experience for me to get to know Josephine Lee. She was very kind to share stories about her life and her creative process. There's so many great takeaways from this conversation that performers everywhere can definitely benefit from. So now, I'm very happy to present my guest, Josephine Lee. This is such a pleasure and an honor because I have joining me today on Improv and Magic. She is the leading female illusionist today. She is the amazing Josephine Lee. Hello, Josephine. So happy you're here today.
Hello, I'm super excited to be here as well. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I'm excited to see what the next hour or so brings.
I understand you just had a big trip to the Mediterranean. Is that true?
Yes, I've been working on a cruise ship for the past almost 2 years now, on and off. And we just finished the European season and then headed over to the Caribbean for winter, which I'm not complaining about at all because these cold winters in England definitely are not the one.
How cold does it get over there in England? I've never been, but I heard it gets pretty cold over there.
It gets very, very cold. It's slightly milder than it used to be, which is a little bit concerning, but it gets very dark very early. I think it's by 4 o'clock. We're pretty much at pitch black, which is not very exciting, and it's not very good for the soul, I don't think.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm in South Florida, and for us, cold is 60.
You poor thing. Must be a terrible, terrible way to live down there.
Oh, yeah, so horrible. It's funny. I remember one of the first times I visited my brother-in-law who lives in Minnesota, and we went there in December, and it was like 12 inches of snow, and I was like, this is awesome. And he was like, yeah, you love it because you don't live here all the time.
I remember the first time I went to America, I was about 19, and Florida was the first stop. And I stood outside the hotel, and it rained, and the rain was warm. And I just couldn't believe it because coming from England, rain is just so miserable. And I couldn't believe I was stood outside in hot rain. And I was just like, this is amazing. We need to live here.
Yeah, I always like to joke around that we do get snow in Florida, but because it's so hot, it just melts on the way down.
I wish it did that here. Unfortunately, it doesn't, though.
Well, we're going to begin as we always begin on Improv and Magic. Where did you grow up and what was growing up like for you, Josephine?
Growing up for me was very interesting because I come from a family where my father is British, my mother is Hungarian, and we traveled a lot with my father's job whilst I was growing up. So I was constantly in and out of different schools around the world, making new friends from all over the world. 1 week I'd have a friend, and then the next week they'd be gone because their parents got moved to a different country. So it was a very exciting life. As I got a bit older, I think I struggled a bit with the constant change. But as I've become older, I've really started to realize that I was quite blessed with experiencing so many different ways of life from such a young age.
I've had the opportunity to speak to other people who, like you, were constantly moving around a lot and always had to develop this chameleon-like personality where they always had to adapt. Was that a difficult thing for you to do, to always have to adapt everywhere you went?
I think growing up as a child, I was quite shy. So I found it quite hard to integrate into new friendship groups. And I always had a lot of friends, but I never felt like I was really settled in a friendship group. And even now that I'm in my 30s, I've got friends from all over the world. I don't necessarily have a big friendship group that we're all included in. I have friends in America. I have friends in Europe. They're spread all around the world, which is great when you want to travel and you've got somewhere to stay everywhere. You've got a room in every country. But I think moving forward and kind of flash forward to now, I think it would be really nice to have a friendship group that you grew up with. And I often see other people who have that, and I'm often quite envious of that. But I'm very, very grateful for the life that I've had, for sure.
When you were growing up, did you have any interest back then of becoming a performer?
Yes, absolutely. That was from, I think I can even think back to when I was about 4 or 5 years old, and I used to put on these shows for my grandparents. So that has always, always been in my DNA. I've always wanted to perform. And interestingly, as I mentioned, I was very shy as a child. But as soon as you put me on stage, it was just like I woke up. So yes, absolutely. Not magic though. Never magic. I was never actually introduced to magic. So I was never aware that that was an industry. I always performed dancing and singing and acting.
So, what were you hoping would be the path for you as you looked forward for the rest of your life, as most kids do?
I wanted to be a ballerina. That was set in stone from probably about 6 or 7 years old. And then I actually trained all the way into my 20s as a ballerina. And now I'm ever so grateful that I did find magic, because I'm still now in my 30s and I'm still performing, which for a ballerina is almost unheard of. I think I can maybe think of a handful of people in the world who are still performing at my age. So I'm incredibly grateful that magic has given me the opportunity to continue to perform, just in a different art form.
Yeah, it's interesting. There are certain things in performing arts where it's a short shelf life, and
Mm.
I know with ballet, it's very much the same thing. Once you reach a certain age, if you haven't done it already, that's it. Was that something that sort of worried you going into ballet?
I think when you're younger, you don't think about it because you've just got such a strong passion for something that you're driven by that passion and you don't really think of the consequences. But I've often thought, when I have children, if I have a daughter and she wants to do ballet, would would I maybe recommend that she goes into a different career path? If there's any other passion out there that she might have, I think I would probably propel her more to that. It's a beautiful industry to be in and to be a part of, but there are very, very few who actually really, really make it. And even when you make a ballet company, you have about 30 or 40 ensemble dancers, but there is only one principal ballerina. So when you think of the chances of actually being that one principal, it's quite slim.
It's kind of like that movie Black Swan.
Exactly. And I don't want to be biting off my nails either. So
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, you touched upon something that always fascinates me, and it fascinates me especially because I'm the exact same way. The idea of being very shy around people, but as soon as you put me on stage, it's like the switch got turned on. You know, do you find that that's a common thing for people, that they are more shy off stage than they are on stage?
it's interesting because I've often wondered this myself. I would actually say that I was more of an introvert than an extrovert. And I am the first to pick up a book and be in bed by 7 p.m. And in this industry, as you know, it's a very social industry, and most people come to life in the evening. Everyone goes out for a drink after the show, whereas I would much rather be in bed with a book. And it's very interesting to see the different characters that are drawn to this industry, and I think it is a real mix. But a lot of creatives I do find do like to spend time on their own, and I've always found it so fascinating that it's almost like you have a lot of people have split personality, but not in a bad way, in a good way, that they almost become their alter ego at night when they come to, they arrive on stage, which I think is such a fascinating thing. And I'd really like to study the psychology around how that works, how how what's happening in the brain for this person who's quite shy to all of a sudden become larger than life. I think it's very interesting.
Other than dance and ballet, what were some of the things that you were influenced by as you were growing up?
I was very influenced by music. I think when you go to ballet school, we have the maestro, and he's playing piano the whole way through your class. So I was around live music from a very, very young age. And even now, when I create acts, I often visualize them to music before I even really know what they are. I can almost kind of see something that's happening on stage, but I feel it instead of actually breaking down the concept of what that act is going to be.
Well, now we get to the big question. How did magic come into your life?
Magic came into my life through an amazing man called Hans Klok, who I'm sure you must be familiar with. He's a Dutch magician. He holds the record for being the fastest magician in the world. And he is one of the friendliest human beings on this planet. He's got such a good soul. And I was a dancer in one of his shows back many, many, many years ago. And he had three main assistants who had worked with him for 20 years plus. They were a family. And one of them was leaving and he needed a replacement. And we'd gotten very, very well during this tour that we'd done. So he asked if I'd be interested in moving out to Amsterdam just for 3 months, just to see if I enjoyed the job. And after 3 months, I just didn't want to leave, and I ended up staying 8 years. I just became completely hooked on the adrenaline, and it was such a different world for me to experience. It was almost coming into this world of variety and cabaret, whereas I'd only ever really experienced ballets and musicals. And it was such a kick. It was such a great industry to be involved with, and also just those reactions that you'd get from magic, those moments where you'd pop out of a box and you'd hear the audience gasp. It was something so new to me, and it became really like almost like a drug. Like I craved this feeling of this adrenaline on stage, and especially working with him because he was the fastest magician in the world. It wasn't like I was just standing there bringing on tables. We were really doing quite incredible, they were almost stunts really. And I just got hooked. That was it. There was no way back. No way back for me.
Before you teamed up with Hans Klok, what was your opinion about magic in general?
I will be honest, I'd never been introduced to magic at all. So when I did start working for Hans, I was also quite withdrawn from the magic community because he has such a big team that we didn't really integrate so much in the magic world. He himself did, but the rest of the team, we didn't. We were just part of this family, part of this product, and we just focused on our act. So it wasn't really until after I finished working with Hans and I started looking into magic and performing myself that I actually started realizing that there was a whole world out there that I had no idea about. And at first, I felt incredibly intimidated by it because it was so vast, and all these people, all these magicians had been performing their entire lives from, the age of 10 years old. And then I turned up and I'm like, I might just see if I can give this a go because I like it. And I felt quite intimidated because I didn't really know how I would be received. But I've actually been very lucky. I've met some incredibly credible people in the industry, people who have really helped me. And without them, I wouldn't be still performing as I am today. So, yeah.
When you started learning magic on your own, did you go the traditional route that most people do, which is like learning with card tricks and close-up magic?
Absolutely not. I'm still not now, and I probably should have started there, but somehow I haven't. I still laugh. My husband still laughs at me. He often asks if I can do a card trick and then just laughs in my face because he knows I probably won't be able to do one.
What a cruel thing to do.
I know, but he's allowed to because he's my husband. I think I'd be quite bruised if someone else did. When I first started doing magic, I felt that I was too far behind to try and catch up on the Hojins and, you know, all these incredible card manipulators, that I would just be wasting my time. And I still feel like to this day. And of course I can do a couple of card tricks, but there's no point in me trying to try and catch up with people who have practiced thousands of hours. So I decided from the very beginning that I was going to try and focus on what my strengths were and to build a persona around what I knew I was good with. And that was, of course, the illusions, because I'd learned that with Hans, and I really understood them. I understood how to use them correctly, how, you know, how to put them to music to create an act. So I started there. And then the past few years, I've started putting full shows together. So for a very long time, I just had a magic act. And then I realized that that was actually really holding me back. That if I had a full show, how much more I could offer. So the past few years, I've been putting shows together, and that's forced me to try and dive deeper into the more of the art of magic. And I've really, really enjoyed myself. And often I kick myself now because I think, why did I wait so long? There's so much out there and it's so exciting. And I think a lot of that was probably slight intimidation. You know, you see how incredible people are, and I just felt, how on earth am I going to catch up with all these hours? But I think I found my own path through magic now, and I'm following that.
Well, I think one of the great things about your performance is that you definitely keep your show looking very, very modern. Your illusion show, it doesn't feel like an old time illusion show from like the 80s and or 90s even. It definitely feels like a very modern show. What do you do to keep your show looking and feeling modern?
That's really interesting you say that. I'm actually really pleased you said that, because I really focused hard on trying to achieve that. On I think it's trying to stay up to date with what's happening. And I'll be honest, a lot of that has actually come in the past few years, because I did shows in London and I read a lot of the reviews, which I probably shouldn't have done. And now I've learned not to read reviews because they can be quite soul destroying sometimes. But a lot of those reviews commented on the fact that, oh, she should be in Vegas. This isn't a very modern magic look. This is for a Vegas show. And it was always, she was very she's not wearing much, she's trying to show off her figure. And I always felt that I really wanted to focus on trying to change that. That was really important to me, that I wasn't viewed as the girl who just jumps out of boxes wearing very little, trying to show off her physique, and she's the blonde dumb girl who jumps out the boxes. It was so essential to me that I changed that idea of who I was. So the past few years I've really focused on updating what I think a magic show looks like. And I think that for me, there's so, you've got this whole era now of Taylor Swift. You've got Beyonce out there. You've got these huge pop stars, but there's no pop star of magic. And I think that that is because magic hasn't really kept up to date with the world. We're still performing a lot of old tricks, and we've moved on. The world's moved on, society's moved on, our topics, our conversations, we live in an entirely different world now, but no one's really highlighting that in magic. So that's what I've been focusing on the past year, actually, is writing a new show at the moment about the topics of today's society. Magic for now, like new magic, what does that look like? So I'm pleased you said that. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's funny, throughout magic history, you see these important figures who are the ones that dare to say, we need to update this. We need to make this modern. And you could definitely trace that all the way back to Robert Houdin. Then you could say eventually it was Houdini, then Doug Heading, then Copperfield, and then maybe even Chris Angel and David Blaine. And it's refreshing for me to see someone like you who says, you know what? Let's not do it the old way anymore. Let's do something new. Let's do something that reflects the world that we are in today.
Absolutely. And I think I might feel slightly stronger about the idea of this because I know that there's very few women in magic. And I know that the women that are, eyes are on us. People are watching to see what we do. And I feel that over the past few years, I've really had to try and define what does a female magician look like, because there's not many out there, and I'm sure it's the same with all magicians. Everyone has different acts. There are definitely other female magicians out there who are doing incredible things, but they're not quite how I view my magic to be. Um, and defining this character has had to make me delve a lot deeper into what this actually means for me and for a future of other women who would like to have a career in magic. And I've met a lot of younger female magicians who are in their teens who are interested, who have actually approached me and said, what do I wear? I'd like to do this trick, but I don't know where do I fit it? How do I fit this into, I'd really like to wear a skirt or a dress, but I don't quite know where to hide all these things. And these are all things that I had to try and answer for myself. So I think that's why for me, it's a very important goal of mine to try and define what this modern female magician, who is she? What does she look like? What does she do? What does her show look like? How has she changed from the assistant to now be the magician? What does that mean for the illusions? All these questions are things that I've really had to try and figure out over the past few years.
Well, it really is wonderful to see that we have been in this sort of renaissance, if you will, of more women coming out and finally saying, you know what, I want to be the magician. You get in the box. And, I remember there was a time like early on where women back in like the 30s and 40s, they were referred to as box jumpers, which just sounds so demeaning, really. What do you think has caused this new renaissance of more women coming out like yourself and taking the stage?
I think before I answer that, I'd actually like to. I think you might be surprised with what I'm about to say, but you say it's demeaning for that we were called box jumpers, but we lived in a time where people didn't really know any different, and especially when I started performing magic, I was so excited to be the assistant. I thought, oh, how wonderful! I'm going to look like the glamorous assistant, Debbie McGee or the others that came before us. And I never saw it as demeaning. And I sometimes think it's slightly harsh to look back at the world of magic and think that these magicians were undermining women and making them fit in these boxes and cut them in half, because I think we knew no different and the women enjoyed it. I think what has happened is that as women, we have grown and the world has changed around us. Women have way more rights now, which is absolutely incredible. And we think, well, actually, I have ideas. I have ideas for a show that I would like to do, or, I'd like to define this new character. And we are allowed to do that. I often hear, so often that, well, there's not many females in magic. No, there's not. But if you want to do it, go out there and do it. No one's stopping you. I mean, I've had so much support from so many people. And I think it's important that we stop talking about this narrative of these poor women that used to get cut in half and just focus on moving forward and bringing the younger generation into magic.
It is quite an accolade to be known as the leading female illusionist of today. Does that ever get intimidating for you to kind of have that title attached to you?
Yes, all the time. All the time. I think I sometimes No, not sometimes. I very often question myself, very, very often. And I think a lot of other artists do exactly the same. And I've seen a lot of people come across as incredibly confident, but behind closed doors had conversations where I realized, okay, actually, this confidence is just a persona, but we all have these doubts that, are we good enough? Are we doing the right thing? What are other people going to think? And this title that I've been given is definitely very intimidating. But I've actually, instead of seeing it as intimidating, I've used it to drive myself forward, to almost see it as you have no choice. If you are going to be the world's leading female illusionist, you better get on with it and just figure it out and try and be that person. So I think it's also been good to motivate me.
People who listen to this podcast will know that I love asking magicians this particular question, in particular because it's also an improv question. I like to ask the question about how much of you gets presented on stage, because oftentimes when we present ourselves on stage, we present a character in some way, shape, or form. Some will say, what I'm showing you is 100% me. Some will say, well, it's sort of 50-50, and some will say it's not me at all. For you, how much of Josephine do we see in your performance?
I think the past year and a half, maybe 2 years, people are starting to see the real me. As I mentioned before, when I started doing magic after I did Britain's Got Talent, I only had a number of acts, and these acts kept getting booked, and they were all silent acts. They were all to music, so I didn't really ever get the chance to really be me. It was always a performance. Whereas the past few years, I've actually started writing my own material and being brave enough to start putting myself into the show. And since I've been doing that, I've actually found performing considerably easier. And it's been really interesting to have that realization of that actually you don't need to pretend to be anyone. You just need to be yourself, but a little bit bigger. And the audience's reaction and the way you can connect with an audience is it's actually quite overwhelming once when you get that connection and you think, oh my gosh, they actually, maybe they do like me. Maybe it's not just the whole big music and big props. And that's a really powerful feeling. Very, very powerful.
Other than the top leading female illusionist, what would you say you want your audiences to think of you?
I would like them to feel like I'm a good person. That is really, really important to me. It's actually really interesting. I've slightly off topic, but a very good friend of mine is very much into these 16 personalities. I don't know if you've heard about it, but basically there's 16 types of personalities in the world. And you can do a personality test. And anyone who's listening, I think the website is 16personalities.com. You do this test, it takes about 20 minutes. You answer all these questions about yourself, and then it tells you the type of personality that you are. And it gives you a bit of a description about how you handle situations, your interactions with other people, the how you deal with things in life. And I was incredibly shocked at how accurate my personality was. And the number one thing on there was honesty and doing right. And for me, that really struck a chord, because it is very important to me to be a good person. And I think I recently started using my show to portray messages, to make people feel good, and to really leave the show thinking, leaving them with a topic that makes them go home and think, oh, actually, maybe I can do this. Or maybe what if I view this situation in a different way? I read a lot of self-help books. I hate that they call them self-help. They should call them like motivational books or self-discovery books, not self-help. But a lot of those books that I've read over the years and have helped me, I now want to put into a show that will help other people.
That certainly has become a bigger trend within the last 20 or 30 years in magic, where it's no longer just here's a trick that'll fool you. It's now more of here's a trick that's going to make you experience something or make you learn something. And I love the idea of a magician who can focus on not just what the audience sees or hears, but what the audience feels. Is that definitely true for you?
Absolutely. And I've really studied this over the past few years because, especially with all these AGT TV shows and talent contests and things, I've really looked at like who is it who's striking a chord with the audience and why. And it's always because they make them feel something. And even when I watch a show as well, I mean, I cry almost every day. My husband laughs at me, but if I haven't cried by the end of the day, then something's definitely wrong. I feel a lot. And I think when you watch these TV shows, it's always because there's a story, either a background story or someone sings a song and those words in that song resonate with you for some reason. And that makes you feel something. And a lot of magic and a lot of magicians, it's interesting to see the people that I enjoy watching are always not necessarily because of the magic trick, but it's what they've taught me. They've taught me something, or they've made me think something, or they've made me question something. But often it's got nothing to do with the magic. The magic is just a little added bonus on the end, but it's actually the story. And that's incredibly hard to achieve with magic. I often think it's much easier for singers because music really resonates with people and it really hits hard on the soul. Whereas with magic, how do you make someone feel the same feeling they do when they listen to music?
Well, of course, we all remember you from your performance on Britain's Got Talent. Can you talk about what that experience is like? How did that opportunity come about? And what were some of your fond memories of being on the show?
I don't know if I'd say they were fond, they were stressful. I was in a magic show in London with the winner of BGT. I can't remember what year it was. His name's Richard Jones. Really, really lovely guy. And he had won the show, and they put him into our show, Impossible, in West End. And the producers came to watch him in the show. And during that show, they obviously saw me, and afterwards they called to say, "We'd seen you in Impossible. We'd love to put you on Britain's Got Talent." And the first thing I thought was, oh no, I don't have anything good enough. You know, I've not been doing this for very long. All the self doubt just came flooding in. And then I realized that, you know, I really had nothing to lose. Like, I didn't really have an act at the time, but if I could create one, it might change my life. If it goes wrong and it doesn't work out, then no one knew who I was anyway. So I had a lot of help. I was working with a guy called Jonathan Goodwin at the time. He helped me with creating the act for Britain's Got Talent. On the show, the first time that I'd ever got the illusion right was during the live filming. So the
Wow.
whole lead up to it had just not worked. Everything that could have gone wrong went completely wrong. I didn't have much money at the time, so I couldn't really pay for expensive rehearsal space, and this prop was huge, and the setup for that was absolutely insane. So nothing was really on my side at all, but somehow the universe did well and they made it go right that one time. And then after that, all the work came flooding in from, you know, shows that I didn't even know existed. But my issue was that I only had one act. So I'd gone on to this show. I did two acts, I think. And I remember in the final, I remember being stood on stage when they announced who's going round to the final. And I just kept thinking, please don't pick me. Please don't pick me. Please don't pick me. Because I had no third act. I was like, the show's next week and I don't have anything to do. And so it did exactly what I wanted it to do. It gave me exposure and it brought in all the work. But then I didn't have this huge pressure of having to come up with a final for the show. But because I only had a couple of acts, people were sending these emails saying, we'd love to book you for your 2-hour show in God knows where. And I couldn't take any of the work because how on earth was I going to put together 2 hours of material in like 2 weeks? So as amazing as it was for my ego, I wasn't equipped to do what people were asking. So unfortunately, as amazing as the experience was, I didn't use it to its full potential because I just wasn't prepared enough. I had no idea that there was going to be this whole big explosion of, his work for the next 5 years. So it's a bit of a shame because I really wish that if I had done it now, I would have been so much well equipped to really ride that wave of, that those TV shows do give you. But it did me well. I worked for a long time, and it's incredible how those shows run your career so long. I mean, it was nearly 7 years ago, and people still email me to say, "We've seen your video on YouTube. Can we book your act?" And you just think, wow, how after 7 years is it still getting millions of views? So it's a very powerful entertainment factory, I like to call it, to be in or to be involved in.
You know what's really funny to me? I've had the opportunity to speak to a couple of other people that were on Britain's Got Talent, and they kind of had the same response as you did. I got to talk to Colin Cloud, and I got to talk to Chloe Crawford, and they all said the same thing. They were invited to come, and their first instinct was to turn it down because they were like, "Well, I don't have enough acts for this." Yet they decided to just jump into it without having anything and just taking that risk. Is that a good way to sort of describe you? Are you the type of person that will just jump into something not knowing whether or not this is going to work?
I think I my dad always taught me just say yes and figure it out afterwards, which I've kind of lived by that rule. But and luckily, I've never let anyone down. I've always stuck to my word and managed to produce, good shows. Um, I it's interesting because I've been asked to do America's Got Talent pretty much for 7 years, which after I did Britain's Got Talent, they email every year. And I've been very, very cautious because I now understand how powerful that show can be if you execute it correctly. And if you're prepared and you've got everything in place afterwards. So you've got the production company there ready to take you on tour straight afterwards. You've got a team of people to push you forward. So I think sometimes naivety can be a very good thing, but once you've experienced it, it's hard to just throw yourself back into it with that mindset of, let's see what happens.
Of all of your performances on Britain's Got Talent, I have to say the one that's my absolute favorite is the one with the three orbs that appear in the box. And the reason why I loved it is because it's a very unique variation of an older trick, which I'm sure most magicians will, of course, recognize. What was the inspiration for that routine?
So, as I mentioned, Jonathan Goodwin really helped drive that act and really bring it to life. He initially came up with the concept, and I remember I first said to him, "Oh, that won't work. That won't look good," and he was like, "Yeah, it will. You should try it." So I kind of took the idea and made it my own. And at the time, Maleficent, the movie, the Disney movie, was quite a big hit. And I thought it was so incredible having this like powerful force of a woman just with, one hand swipe, just moving cities and creating, just she disrupted everything. And I loved that concept of moving powerful things around the room. And that was kind of the inspiration for that act.
Do you find it difficult to top yourself?
Oh my gosh, yes. Do you know, it's so interesting because as I mentioned, Jonathan helped me with that act at the beginning. And then a lot of people say, "Oh, I've never really seen anything like that before." And then you have this expectation of yourself. Well, then everything I create has to be something that no one's ever seen before. And for a long time, that really stunted my growth as a performer because every idea that I came up with, I was like, well, it's not good enough as the floating ball, or it's not as different. It looks too similar to something else. And I really had to let go of that because I realized that if you sit and wait for something incredible to happen or an amazing idea to just, pop out of your brain in the middle of the night, it's never going to come. You have to just keep creating and creating and creating. And then every now and again, something amazing will pop up and you think, oh, that could work. But it is hard. It's very, very hard to create new material that no one else has done before.
There are a lot of performers, magicians, improvisers, actors who are plagued by that feeling of it's still not good enough. People who are like, I guess you could say, over perfectionist about everything. Is it difficult to sort of satisfy yourself, or are you good with being able to say, yep, it's good, there's nothing else that we need to do with this?
No, I really struggle. And I think a lot of people should talk about it. And I think we should all be quite open about how we feel about it, because there's nothing worse than having these, thoughts of I'm not good enough, I could have done better, it's not quite right. And seeing other people and thinking, why can't I just not care like them? And I have spent so much time really, really questioning myself. And it's such an awful feeling. It's really, really, it's pretty horrendous. And I think people do need to support each other when it comes to creating. And I often think that I love the magic community, but because I have been involved in other communities within the arts, such as dancing, musicals, it's very apparent to me that magicians don't often collaborate. We don't really come together and think, right, let's create an amazing act. Because a lot of magicians are creating their own act. And if someone else or, everyone else is doing their act, then that doesn't make them unique anymore. And because we don't collaborate as a community so much, it can often make you question yourself whether you're good enough, and that can be quite challenging.
Why do you think magicians are not too keen on collaborating with each other, as you described?
I think when you're creating or producing a show such as a musical, we're immediately in a team. And it's always been like that. Before I did magic and I was working in the theatre, on day one, you're put with a group of 20, 30 people, and they're just your family from day one. Okay, we're all going on this journey together for the next 6 months. We're creating something special. And the more we individually put into this, the better the result is going to be for everyone involved. Magic doesn't work like that, because magicians are an individual. So I think it's hard, because you have these TV shows where people collaborate and they come out with incredible products. And you also have theatre shows, a magician, where they'll get a consultant on, they'll get a writer on, they'll get directors involved, and they work as a team. But magicians at home creating their own acts for their own performances, a lot of the time they want to have the the recognition for their performance, and they can't achieve that if they say there's been 10 other people who helped me make this. So it's an interesting world to be involved in, but I've always said from the very beginning that as an art form, I think magic would be so much further on if magicians collaborated with each other.
For the last 5 years, and I've shared this on the show here before, the thing that I now have been telling myself, and I found that it helps so much and it really takes the pressure off with everything that I do. I tell myself, you know what, LD, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be me.
That's really nice. And I'm sure you've heard of David Britland. He's an incredible writer, and he used to write for Derren Brown. He works a lot with Luis de Matos. And I did a TV show years ago with Luis de Matos. It was his TV show Impossível, which I think is impossible in Portuguese. And it didn't quite go right. It was live TV, and I think my shoe fell off halfway through an illusion, and I got really upset. And David could see how upset I was. And he came up to me and he said, "You don't need to be the best. You just need to be working." And it really, really stuck with me. And I often wish that I just tattooed it on my forehead. So every time I looked in the mirror, I remembered that, because it's such a nice thing to think, yeah, no, I don't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be 100%. It just has to be good. And sometimes good is good enough. But unfortunately, as artists, I think everyone is striving to create next level work. And a lot of people strive their entire career to achieve something unique and special that, is going to leave a bit of a legacy for them. And it can be tough, I think, on a lot of people, for sure.
You've had the opportunity to perform in some touring shows. You toured with Champions of Magic and Illusionist 2.0, and now I know that you're touring with your own show. Do you enjoy the tour lifestyle, or do you prefer to just have one set location?
As I've got old, I'm making myself sound really old. I'm really not that old. I think I'm just an old soul. But the past few years, I've got married, and life is life actually hasn't changed that much, because we're still traveling and we're always together, which is really nice. And I think I'm so lucky that I've married someone who has a company online, so he can actually come with me, which I never thought would ever be possible. But I've slowed down a lot, I think, in my mind, and being on tour late nights, always in the bar. I think as I've got to my 30s, as I mentioned, I do like a good book. So I do like, I think the one thing I've never had is a routine. I've never had a routine. And as I've got a bit older, I'm starting to slowly crave that. So I think one set location would be very, very nice. But I'm not lucky enough yet to have experienced that.
You know what? You're going to be the first person that I ask this question. How good is it to have your husband as a support for you?
I think the past 3, 4 years since I've had him, he has really considerably pushed me forward in this industry. He is also a creative, so having his eye on things, he's a graphic designer, so he creates all the graphics for the show, which has really, really helped with this modern look. um, he's helped so much. And I think when I first started doing magic, I was really on my own, and I had these huge props. I remember I ordered one illusion, and I stupidly ordered it to my house because I just assumed that we could put it in the corner. Yeah, you're laughing. It was almost like a comedy sketch. And I lived on a high street at the time, and then this illusion turned up, and it was just this huge, like massive, like 3 by 3 meter flight case. And I was just like, who's this for? And he was like, Josephine Lee. And I was like, but where am I going to put it? And I remember being stood on a bloody high street in the middle of London with this huge flight case, just thinking, oh my God, where am I going to put it? And I had to deal with all of this stuff by myself. And there were so many times that I just thought, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And then when I met him, he just kind of took over all the logistics. He got a warehouse. He was like, right, we're doing this, doing that. This is, how this is going to work. I'm going to book the tickets, and everything just became so much easier, to the point that I just felt like I could just focus on the performing side of things and creating. So I'm ever so envious of these illusionists who have these huge teams. It must be so nice just to be able to worry about what you're actually doing on stage and not all the logistics of everything else.
At any point in time, have either of you ever thought about including him in the act?
He actually is. So
Oh, he
the
is.
yeah, he actually is. He'll laugh. So his name's Mike, and we call him Magic Mike in the show. He travels with me on the cruise ship, and when I got the job on the cruise ship, we I knew that I wanted him to come with me, and the only way that we were going to make that possible was if he was implemented into the show. And he's such a great sport. Like, he's got his own successful business, but he still gets on stage and he lets me tie him up and call him Magic Mike. So he's a right trooper. But yeah, and since he's been involved in the show, it's so nice, because I don't know any of the other couple or friends of ours who would ever get to experience that. And I think when we're when we're in our 90s, we'll look back and we'll laugh about how we used to call him Magic Mike on stage.
Well, you've had the opportunity to perform in big theaters and great stages and cruise ships. And then, of course, the pandemic happened, which, of course, shut the entire world down. How did you manage to sort of get through that time where people could not come to a theater, could not even leave their house?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people went online and a lot of people were doing Zoom shows. And I was lucky enough my husband does have a business and he has an online business and he creates multimedia shows for corporate events, and those kind of transferred over to virtual. So I kind of jumped on board at the time with that and started producing content and shows for him. And that kind of kicked off, and we were really lucky that we had a very decent income during COVID. So I kind of completely switched off from magic. And after COVID, I actually questioned whether or not I wanted to go back to performing, because I'd had 2 years where I wasn't feeling anxious or I wasn't feeling stressed about, the next gig. Like we'd found and built this business where I didn't actually have to keep performing anymore. And it made me realize how not stressed I was when I was performing, but how I think as a performer, we don't have a stable life. We're constantly searching for the next gig, or we're traveling here, traveling there, coming up with new material. It's a very busy, busy, busy life, and it can take its toll, I think. So having these 2 years where all of a sudden I wasn't living this fast paced life, I got to the end of the 2 years and I was like, actually, maybe I'm okay without doing it. But then I had an email from the producers of a show in London called Wonderville, which was going to be similar to the Illusionists, and it was going to open up in West End. And of course, I got that email and I just thought, oh my God, I've got to do it. And then started performing. We went back during, I think it was 2021, the summer of 2021. And during that show, the very first week, I tore my ACL in my knee.
Mm.
I jumped off the sub trunk and my knee just snapped in half. And I think having the 2 years of not being on stage, not really exercising so much, I think my body was a bit weaker than I had realized. And then I had to have another year off. I had to have surgery and I had to have knee reconstruction. And during that year, I realized how badly I wanted to be on stage. And I think when it gets taken away from you, you realize how much it means to you. And after that, I went into Champions in Magic. And since then, I've just been pushing forward with work and just kind of going at it full force, because I've actually realized how I don't really know any different. This is who I am. And without it, I don't really know who I am.
Did you have any mental or emotional difficulty getting back into performing?
Yes, I really struggled with confidence. I actually went to see a hypnotist. I was panicking about getting back on stage, about talking on stage. And a friend of mine had said that they had been to see a hypnotist. Well, they own a dance school and they had a lot of students who had confidence issues, and they'd sent the students to the hypnotist and that they recommended that I went to see him. So I had 2 sessions with him and he actually changed my life. It was unbelievable how he just changed my mindset. And that's actually given me the confidence to put myself forward now and drive my career in a different path that I thought I was going to previously. I think before I always questioned whether I could do it. Whereas now, like, he said something to me in that session that really resonated with me. He was like, if everybody else can do it, why couldn't you? And that was it. And it was just like a light bulb moment. And I was like, yeah, why couldn't I? I just need to put the work in. So absolutely. I think everyone did after COVID. I spoke to a lot of performers who really, really struggled getting back on stage. It was intimidating. We've been sat at home for 2 years, and then all of a sudden you were supposed to be exceptional in front of 2,000 people. It wasn't natural to anyone anymore.
A lot of times David Copperfield talks about how he worries about that one lady in the front row who isn't smiling. And I know a lot of performers have that same attitude. If they see that one person that doesn't look like they're enjoying themselves, that's enough to crush them. Do you worry about whether or not everyone in the audience is having a good time?
Yes, I am the worst for it. It was only a couple of weeks ago we did a show and I had a standing ovation, but there were four people on the front row who didn't stand up.
Oh no.
And it was probably like a cultural thing. I know in a lot of different countries around the world, standing ovations aren't actually a thing. And we got back to the bedroom and I was so upset, and he was like, how did you not see everybody else? He was like, why is it that four people out of all the other hundreds of people bother you? And it's true. It's something that I think we need to try to learn to deal with, because you put these expectations on yourself. And I think the hardest thing to overcome is actually trying to deal with the expectations that we give ourselves, not from anyone else. I mean, if I never went back on stage, I don't think anyone would really bat an eyelid. But for me, it would be like I've let myself down. So I can definitely resonate with that.
Yeah, it's kind of like, as the expression goes, being so far into the forest you can't see the trees.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Very good saying.
In 2023, you had this incredible venue, and I loved it because, again, going back to what we said earlier, it was a very modern looking venue, and it wasn't a traditional magician stage. Typically, on a magic stage, there's black curtains and there's your typical proscenium stage, but this was a very wide open space and a big LED screen around the back, and it wasn't completely in the round, but it was halfway there, which I'm sure most magicians would be very afraid of because there's very, very little to hide. How was that experience performing in such a wide open space like that?
I think the hardest thing is that you have to accept that you can't perform everything. So you might have some great acts, but you just have to think, okay, they don't exist because they won't work. And that can really be quite upsetting because, you're constantly going, I've worked so hard on these acts and I know that they would improve the show so much more, but you just can't use them. But the way we viewed it was we had something that was so great, which was the LED screens and the vastness of them. They almost completely surround an audience, so you can create an immersive experience. So it was, instead of looking at what we can't use, what can we use? What have we got that most venues would absolutely die for? So we really focused on creating content material driven acts. How can we use the content to tell these stories, to interact? We actually recently integrated an AI act into the show where we have I have an AI assistant called Iris, and she does a magic trick on the audience, and it was so well received. And it was really interesting because I wasn't on stage. We'd created an entire magic act that was done through voice and content, and it was so well received that we actually questioned, what does AI mean for us as performers? If a silly computer can create this reaction from an audience without any of us on stage, should we be worried? But again, that goes back to the beginning where I said, really starting to focus on creating material that's relatable to what we're, the era that we're currently living in. We live in a different world now, so maybe we will be having AI assistants soon.
Is there anything you haven't accomplished yet that you're hoping to achieve later on?
Yeah, quite a few things, but I'm keeping those close to my heart. I feel like it's very, very important for the big, big things that, are really deep in the heart. I think they're quite important to keep close. There's a saying, work hard and let your success, or was it work hard and let your success speak for itself or something? And I think, you know, There's also another saying that empty barrels make the loudest noise. And I think some people are very quick to say, oh, I'm going to be doing this. And it can put this intense pressure on people to achieve it. So yes, there absolutely are. There's quite a few things that I'm working on at the moment. Just when they happen, I'll let you know. I'll send you an email. This was one of them.
I look forward to that. Josephine, here's the final question. What's the one piece of advice that has served you well that you'd want everyone else to hear?
Be you. I think that's so important because it's the easiest thing for you to do is to just be yourself plus a little extra. And I think when you're yourself, you connect with an audience. You can get across whatever message you're trying to be, to get across to people when you are yourself. But an audience can feel when you're not you. When you're trying to be someone else, they feel it. So I think that's really important to be you plus a little extra glitter.
I love that. A little extra glitter. I'm going to apply that.
Yeah.
Josephine, I had such a great time talking to you today. Thank you so much for being here on Improv and Magic, and I wish you all the best in your future, my friend.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yes, there's nothing better than being yourself. We want to see you. We want to hear you. We want to know you. You all hear me say this all the time now, and it's the perfect time to reemphasize this. You are who you are, and you are special. I'd like to give a very special thank you to Josephine Lee for joining us today. It was a true pleasure and honor to get to know you, my friend. And you will want to get to know her as well, and you can do that by visiting her website, josephinelee.co.uk. And if you're lucky enough to meet Josephine, tell her LD says hi. Thank you all, my friends, for joining me on this special episode of Improv and Magic, and thank you for these past 2 years of fun. Cheers, everybody. God bless you all, and I'll see you next time here on Improv and Magic.